This episode is brought to you by 180 Markets, where it is our goal to bring every individual, fund manager, family office, or any qualified investor access to Australian Stock Exchange capital raises. If you are ever interested in how to access ASX capital raises in a super simple way, 180 Markets is for you. The sign-up process is easy. You just upload your ID, proof of your investor status, and your current brokerage account information. The settlement of shares goes right into your existing account, and you can access our very next capital raise. If you're interested in free, easy access to thousands of ASX capital raises, including placements, IPOs, reverse takeovers, and more, check out 180markets.com. Welcome yet again, another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Friends, you know that we are always trying to bring you incredibly interesting investments, but also what we love, especially in the medical space, is to bring you interesting investments that are also doing good. And we have with us a company today, Actinogen, and their new managing director. And we're going to talk all about what they are doing, where the company is at. They're going big game hunting, as I like to say it, as far as trying to solve really big problems like Alzheimer's in the world. Anyway, really interesting, really fascinating. And again, I can't stress it enough. We're really trying to change the world, and we are in the golden age of medicine. With the introduction, Stephen Gourlay from Actinogen, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Hey, Stephen, a lot of people have had some previous successes in their lives, but you in particular have had some really tremendous success. Can you just give everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yep. So I'm a medical doctor trained as an internal medicine physician and a PhD in clinical trials all in Melbourne, in Australia. And then I went over to the US in the 90s to work in academia. And then my first job out of academia was at Genentech, and then baby biotech company. And that's where I really learned to follow the sort of the science of what we do in drug development, not just the basic science, but the science of good clinical trials, good collaborations with investigators, and really, an excellent statistics and design. And then subsequently, I came back to Australia and learned the ropes as a venture capital investor for a while, and went back to the US for my last opportunity, which is called Principia Biopharma, where we took two small molecules, not dissimilar to Xanamem, our molecule here at Actinogen, two small molecules forward from late preclinical testing through into phase 2 and phase 3. Took the company public, and Sanofi bought that company for about 3.7 billion last year, which was a nice end result. Arguably, possibly even a little bit cheap in today's biotech valuation, but Sanofi got two really good molecules for a number of different autoimmune diseases, including multiple sclerosis. So it was a great honor to be the chief medical officer in that company and be able to sit at the table and design these programs, and also do the relevant Wall Street roadshows for the IPO. So an amazing experience. So when I came back to Australia for family reasons, just before COVID hit, I was interested in looking at some good Australian opportunities, having sort of planned to retire from full-time American life, and I'm back for family really. But late in the year, I was asked to have a bit of a look as a consultant for Actinogen, and was quite impressed by what I saw. Phase 2 molecule with activity proven to improve cognition in older healthy volunteer adults, and a really interesting and promising pharmaceutical with pharmaceutical properties that are very advantageous, with a low risk of drug interaction potential, and an excellent clinical safety database of more than 200 subjects and patients treated already. So essentially, it's an opportunity where we know it works, we know the dose, we know it's safe in humans, and we're poised to now deliver 3 different phase 2s in different diseases in the next year to 2 years.
Absolutely. And when you say, it's incredible just how many, shots at it you have, but can you just describe for the audience the specific cures you're going for and your drug and how it all works at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So the molecule is a once a day, well, it's actually a capsule now, but it can be a pill, but it's a once a day pill taken just normally like any other pill. And what it does, it inhibits a critical enzyme in different tissues in the body, but in particular, the target here is the brain. And what it does is it reduces the level of the stress hormone cortisol inside brain cells. Elevated levels of cortisol inside brain cells are associated with various different diseases, but including the decrease in mental abilities that you get with aging, and in particular Alzheimer's disease. There's a strong association with abnormal brain cortisol in Fragile X, and there's some upregulation of the particular enzyme that this molecule of ours inhibits, NMN. And then there are some other diseases where brain cortisol may be relevant, and we're going to announce the third indication for this molecule in the coming months. So basically, the concept is that this molecule gets into the brain in adequate concentrations to inhibit an enzyme that produces an abnormally high level of that stress hormone called cortisol. And by correcting that, you then improve cognition or the ability to think, improve the symptoms of this rare genetic disease called Fragile X, and then potentially impact other diseases as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Alzheimer's, as we know, is just an enormous market, not just in Australia, but sadly globally as well. And you're in phase 2 right now. Can you describe for the audience just what does that exactly mean?
Sure. So, in the drug development, broadly speaking, has 3 phases. The first phase, you just test varying different doses, often single doses, and then maybe treat for 10 days. To measure the levels of the blood and what effects it might have on hormones and other things in the body. That's called phase 1. Phase 2 is when you really test it in patients to see whether it actually has activity to impact the disease that you're studying. Now, ideally in phase 2, you measure endpoints that you might be able to use later in phase 3 studies, which the FDA and the TGA then use to approve the drug for marketing. So basically phase 2 is the middle stage of testing. And it's very important to understand the dose that you want to take forward to get approved. So typically what you do is you measure multiple different doses and the effects on the body of that in phase 2. And then you also measure which endpoints or things that you can measure. For example, how do you measure improved thinking in patients with Alzheimer's disease?
That was going to be one of my questions.
There's a list of about 20 or so different ways you can do it. And so the art of clinical trials is to choose the endpoints, the ways of measuring that are potentially sensitive to your drug's mechanism of action and clinically meaningful, and also meaningful to the FDA and the TGA, who will later on have to decide whether or not you've proven what we call clinical benefit.
Absolutely. And is this an ongoing discussion? Because, you've just described there are a myriad of different combinations you can have as far as what is the effective dose, how much are you taking, and what is success? So is this more of a dialogue, or is it just a yes, no?
So drug development is a series of what we call exploratory studies, where you sort of have an open-ended view of, you measure everything and see what happens, and then confirmatory studies where you say, okay, now we've decided it's really going to improve. For example, we use a test called the Cogstate Neuro Test Battery, which is a computerized iPad test of speed of mental processing and memory. And then we say, okay, we're going to take that endpoint and we're going to confirm that it works in that particular thing. And so with the FDA, typically when you do a program under what they call an IND, you have a series of discussions with them. You always submit the protocols, as we do, and they have the opportunity to comment. And typically, it isn't until we call this meeting the end of phase 2 meeting that they get serious about which endpoints they are going to insist upon you study in the final studies, which will get you marketing approval in the United States. Now, the European Medicines Authority has a similar sort of process. And so, again, the art of this middle stage of testing, phase 2, is to design the trials to fairly convincingly, as much as you can, show improvement in relevant endpoints that can then be folded into a late stage program with the FDA blessing.
Absolutely. And the timing for this phase 2, would you expect to see some results, let's say, like in the rest of this calendar year, or do you have a broad sense of timing?
Sure. So for our Alzheimer's program, we're doing what we call the Xanamea study, and it's starting in a few months' time, and then it will read out the first part, which is the dose ranging part, where we test 2 different doses versus a placebo or sugar pill. That will read out in the first part of 2022. And then the second part of that study will actually test patients with Alzheimer's themselves who have a positive blood test showing that they've got a protein related to Alzheimer's in their blood. And those patients, though, will be very early in the stage of their disease. So they'll basically not have any functional problem. In other words, they'll probably be able to shop and drive normally, but they'll be having a failing memory issue. Those patients will then be tested with the same endpoints we've used previously, namely the Cogstate neurotest battery using an iPad computerized test. So that will show that we are able to, with this drug Xanamem, improve the way people can think and remember in patients with Alzheimer's disease. But it's the early stages of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, even saying that, you know, the category of Alzheimer's is so large that even if you could help a small percentage of people in the early stage, I'm sure that that would be incredibly advantageous to millions of people.
That's true. I mean, the market is huge, as you said, but, you know, I guess more importantly, alluding to your introductory comments, you know, the unmet medical need is massive because as our population is aging, we have, you know, a huge number of people here in Australia and around the world where they are growing old, their memory is failing, but they're still able to live independently to a certain extent. And if a drug can help them, you know, maintain that independence of living for an extra, you know, 6 or 12 months even, it's still a significant medical benefit.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it's not just living longer, but it's the quality of your life too that is so important.
Correct.
I mean, we all know that, you know, life expectancy in the post-World War II era has really doubled, you know, frankly, just about. But, you know, what is the quality of your life at living at 90 years old, so to speak? That's really important.
Yep.
Can you just turning towards Xanamem for a second, what makes this drug in your mind a little bit different than maybe anything else that's out there that you've seen so far? Because I assume you've seen a lot of other potential competitors.
Sure. So nothing's been approved for Alzheimer's disease since 2003. So,
Wow.
and prior to that, I think there's a total of 4 small molecules that have been approved. The main class was called acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. One of those drugs' names is Aricept. And it basically, there's been a dearth of success since then. People have been trying amyloid antibodies, which Biogen have got and Lilly have got a program. They've struggled to really affect the biology of the disease. And so what we have with Xanamem, because it inhibits a unique enzyme in the brain called the 11-beta HSD1, it's very technical.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. But it's a very different mechanism than anything else that's gone before. And the drug is also suitable with its pharmaceutical properties to be used in combination with other things. So there's no reason that if another therapy like an amyloid antibody emerges, there's no reason these drugs couldn't actually be used together. So it's a unique mechanism. And what we're doing in the phase 2 and phase 3 programs will be showing just how that improves people's lives by measuring different endpoints and hopefully putting together a story of significant clinical benefit that hopefully is different and superior to other therapies that are available.
Absolutely. And, you know, and then turning onto the commercialization point, because this is always, you know, such a touch point with not just drugs, but also anything medical technology. It's all well and good, but you have to be able to commercialize the product.
Right.
And you know, obviously in your experience, you've had quite a bit of experience in that phase of it. Are you already in discussions, or how does it work with whether it's big pharma or distribution arms, or how does it come about from going from a lab to finally, you know, I need the drug, how do I get it?
Yep, absolutely. So we have 3 different diseases that we're going to be testing in phase 2. So there's a number of different outcomes or scenarios that could emerge from this period of testing. If of course we hit a win on, you know, 2 or 3 or all 3 of those diseases, that then you know, puts us in a remarkable position to either raise the money to continue the development of the molecule independently, or to form a partnership with a big pharma partner, obviously. Fragile X, which is our rare pediatric disease designation drug or indication, that is a situation where we could get it to market ourselves relatively fast. With these rare orphan diseases, once you have the initial proof of concept proving that it works, you can then go on usually to do a single phase 3 study that would get your marketing approval. So that's a scenario, Fragile X is successful, where we could get the drug to market relatively quickly. It's still going to take several years, but it will be faster than if we, for example, kept going in Alzheimer's disease all the way to commercialization. So along the way, when you run a company like Actinogen, you're always talking to big pharma. So we're always keeping them informed. We're always making sure they understand the latest clinical trial results and what we're doing with the program. And at the moment, because we have plenty of money in the bank to fund these clinical trials, we're not in a position where we need to take an undervalued deal with any of these people. So we plan to talk to them, keep them up to date, and then if at the end of the phase 2 program it makes sense to form some sort of partnership, we'll consider it then.
Right. So said, in short, especially when you're trying to solve something like Alzheimer's, nothing that is in phase 2 would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that this is happening. All big pharma would just through publicly available information, conferences and so forth, they're going to know you exist. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of different things being tried for Alzheimer's. Most of them, they're all, the bigger programs are all well understood, and yeah. So I think what we're doing for Alzheimer's is of great interest to the pharma partners, and typically a pharma partner for any disease, not just Alzheimer's, will prefer to you pay to de-risk it, and they'll pay more later, right? So that's the typical game they play. However, if we show striking phase 2 data, hopefully one can create a greater level of interest. So
absolutely. And in your case, turning to the corporate balance sheet, you have about $15 million of cash, so you're completely funded at this point, which really puts you in a very strong position. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, absolutely. So we are fully funded to do the Alzheimer's clinical trial, the Fragile X trial, and the third indication proof of concept study. And we've got cash well into 2023.
Absolutely. And in your mind, your definition of Actinogen's success over the next 12 to 24 months, what would be your view of success?
Success will be continuing to prove out the worth of this molecule Xanamem in cognitive impairment in the Alzheimer's patient population. So in my view, given that we have improvement on the Cogstate test already with healthy older volunteers, the risk for that program is relatively low because we're essentially using the same endpoint and expanding it with by supplementing other endpoints with it. So a positive result there will be a very strong result. Then the Fragile X program and the third indication, those are both proof of concept studies. And to have one or other of those prove positive, plus the likely result of a positive cognitive impairment study, that would be a very strong success story for us. And obviously the way out, hitting it way out of the park would be if all 3 diseases showed strong positive results. But let's just go for the mid case.
Absolutely. Hey, Stephen, it's incredibly exciting what Actinogen is doing. And obviously, it wasn't lost on you because that's what's drawn you to the business.
Yep.
Do you have any closing words for the audience at this point in time?
Look, I think this is, I like to also put my money where my mouth is, I guess. So, at the beginning of this process, as I did at Principia in my last job, I put about 500,000 Australian into that company in its early stages when arguably it was still, I thought it was relatively de-risked, but it still took a while to get it all across the line, but it was a great success story. So I did put 330,000 of my own money into the shortfall placement in February for this company. believing as I do in the value of the opportunity and its chances of success. So I do like to invest in things where I am involved and have a seat at the table, and can make things happen. And I've done that again here. So yeah, I always think that's a good takeaway for other investors, to see somebody like me doing that.
Absolutely. Stephen, please stay in touch. We wish you the best, not only as investors, but also, really to try to make the world a better place. And as I said, in the beginning, if you could even, remotely help with Alzheimer's, millions and millions of people will benefit.
Yep. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to bringing you those results.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching another presentation by 180 Markets. Don't forget, if you want access to thousands of ASX capital raises, head on over to 180markets.com.au, sign up, and get on board for our very next capital raise. Thanks for watching.